Good morning, everyone, and Shana Tova. I'm going to start off a little different this morning. I'm starting off with a confession. Yom Kippur seems okay, right? So my wife makes this unbelievable mandel bread. It's just ridiculous. My grandma had this recipe. My wife couldn't duplicate it. She finally kind of figured it out and maybe, sorry grandma, even surpassed. And I was complaining because I forgot to grab one before the sun went down last night. So whoops. Cantoron, thank you so much for your daily doses of leadership and inspiration to all of us. It's absolutely incredible. And also for teaching us the vast importance of a strong and flourishing Israel in order for all of us to be strong and flourishing. On this holy day, we read from the book of Jonah, where God instructed Jonah to go to the city of Nineveh and convince its people to atone for their sins or face a terrible fate. Jonah, an ordinary man, did everything he could to avoid this task, for he realized it was a no-win situation. If he were to convince the people of Nineveh, in fact, to repent and mend their ways, then many of them would say, see, no harm befell us. You were an alarmist. You created this circumstance that we didn't really need. And yet, if he failed to successfully get them to atone, then they would have faced the same fate as Sodom and Gomorrah, and he would have failed at his task. This is not unlike what the state of Israel is facing right now, as it is staring in the mouth of the greatest existential threat since its existence in Iran. Israel doing everything it can to convince the civilized world that it must, at this point, do what it can to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear capable weapons, or alternatively, Israel will, if it fails, live in the shadow of annihilation, as will much of the civilized world. I don't know how many of you have been to Masada, but I'm sure all of you are familiar with its story. It's one of those stories that never sat quite right with me, because it took place in the first century. The Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple, and then 960 devoted Jews made their way to Masada for a last stand, or hoping maybe the Romans would leave them alone. Romans didn't. And then, having lost all hope, they finally all took their own lives. It just never felt comfortable to me for a site like this to have such reverence because of the act that took place there. But then, I met someone from Jerusalem the other day, and they told me this story. They were going to the opera. They hold this opera. It's a beautiful event at the base of Masada. People come from all over Israel. They get bussed in from Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv, and everywhere for this beautiful event. It takes place very late at night, and so about 7,500 people come in, get assembled in this elegant, gorgeous affair. They get seated, and then all of a sudden, all the lights go out, and it becomes very quiet. And then, slowly some lights illuminate, and one lone voice, I think one of the performers from the cast, starts singing Hatikva, the national anthem for the state of Israel, the song of hope, hope for our people to be free in our land. And the crowd, as is typically the case, joins in. But in this case, unlike typical, the crowd can't get the words out. They can't sing. It's crazy, and it's because they're so overtaken by emotion, because the juxtaposition of singing the Song of Hope in the nation state of the Jewish people, while at the actual site where in fact almost the last of the Jewish people lost all hope and gave up their lives, further compounded by the thought that that could happen again with what's going on with Iran, a genocidal maniac. These are very unsettling and anxious times for our people. I'm going to do a very quick run through a few key points going on in the Middle East right now, but we will have an in-depth discussion this afternoon, and we'd love for you to join, and we can go into all this in a lot more detail. First, let's talk about Egypt. The Camp David Accords since 1979 have been the cornerstone of Israel's security for more than 30 years. Since the Arab Spring and President Morsi's election, President Morsi being a leader from the Muslim Brotherhood, who now is the president of Egypt, the Camp David Accords are called into question. At a minimum, they're considering whether to amend certain portions of it. And possibly it could go further than that once you start down that slippery slope towards an abrogation of the treaty. The Sinai border has been the one quiet place and the one place Israel didn't have to have its backup at every moment. Well, that's no longer true. Just last month, 34 terrorists came in from Gaza, killed 16 Egyptian policemen, stole the armored vehicles and other weapons, strapped on other sorts of equipment and vests, broke through the border into Israel, and then got within 400 yards of a kibbutz before being repelled. The first time since 1948 that Egyptian armor has penetrated into the Israeli border. You also have Syria. What a mess. More than 20,000 killed. In fact, just yesterday, I think even there was some fire that made its way into the Golan Heights. So it's may not have been intentional, but it's unclear what's going to spill over from there. I need not remind you that Syria, a strong ally of Iran and receiving weapons on a regular basis from Iran, also carries one of the largest chemical weapon stockpiles in the world. There's been some reporting that they have been trying to figure out how to transfer some of that to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So let's move to Lebanon for a second. In Lebanon, it's run by a terrorist organization. The man who runs it's named Nasrallah. It's called Hezbollah. And this organization has specifically called, as you'll hear from Iran as well, for the annihilation and destruction of the Jewish people. In fact, he even commented that he likes that so many Jews are collected in one place in Israel because it'll be easy to kill all the Jews that way. Yet, this organization, which is responsible for terror in Europe, in South America, certainly in the Middle East, the European Union is still struggling and debating whether to declare them as a terrorist organization. There's some challenges still in trying to negotiate peace with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. I'll save that for later. But then let's talk about Iran. Just this week, Iran reminded the world that it views Israel as an insult to humanity, a cancerous tumor, calls for its disappearance, a fellow member state of the United Nations. And in fact, on this holy day today of Yom Kippur, President Ahmadinejad was actually speaking before the UN General Assembly. They're contemplating, according to the Revolutionary Guard, a preemptive strike on Israel at this point. One of the world's foremost authorities on genocide, named Gregory Stanton, was recently interviewed. And he said, genocides, unlike natural disasters, are predictable and all follow the same 8 stages. Iran's already completed 6 of these. The 2 that haven't happened, and hopefully never will, are extermination and denial. I need not remind you of past tragedies that have befallen our people: destruction of the First and Second Temples, Masada, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the endless pogroms, the SS St. Louis, where not even in the United States would they accept this ship after Kristallnacht, and many were sent back to concentration camps and to their death. And of course, the Holocaust. As Israel faces a daily barrage of threats and stares in the mouth of that true, most significant existential threat, I realize it can be exhausting. It can be daunting. To keep up the effort for our people and defend Israel starts feeling like that arcade game with the gopher and the mallet. Just when you get one down, 3 new ones pop up. But we can't give up hope. Like Jonah, we can't run from our responsibilities. Israel desperately needs our support. We are not prisoners of fate. We must help shape history. We must maintain Hatikva for our brothers and sisters in Israel. We cannot allow parents tucking in their children at night in Israel to wonder if there will be a tomorrow. The great Rabbi Hugo Gryn was sent to Auschwitz when he was a boy. He survived, so he tells this story. One day, while at the concentration camp during Hanukkah, they received their meager rations of margarine, just a bare sustenance to try to hope to survive for another day. When his father received his ration, his father took it and instead of eating it, made a makeshift menorah and lit it with this margarine. Hugo was inconsolable. Father, you're not going to survive. How could you do this? You just gave up. This is terrible. And he said, there are three things we've learned since we've been here. First, that we can live without food for up to 3 weeks. Second, that we can live without water for up to 3 days. But we cannot live without hope for 3 minutes. Anne Frank once said, how wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Let's start immediately. Let's save the civilized world, Israel, the Jewish people, from a loss of hope. Let's keep Hatikva alive. We need to do this for those who came before us. We need to do this for our children. We need to do it for our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. We need to do it for the Jewish people. We need to do it for the world. We cannot allow our people to once again lose hope and feel like those 960 on the top of Masada. I'm working on several projects to this end right now, but my request for you this morning is to join me, my wife, my mom, Cantor Ron, family, and a number of members of this congregation at the Policy Conference for AIPAC in March in Washington, D.C. 3 of the most important days affecting the future of Israel, the Jewish people, and frankly, the civilized world, and America for that matter. Please sign up today. There are forms to fill out outside, and we'd love you to be there. I wish you all a year filled with peace, good health, happiness, meaning, purpose, and hope. Gemara Hatima Tova, Am Yisrael Chai.